First of all, welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I wanted to introduce myself, I wanted to introduce Eliass, and then we're going to talk a lot about what you guys need to do to succeed down here on the island to hopefully get back home. Otherwise, you'll be stuck here for a long time, which nobody wants at the end of the day. Quick show of hands. How many of you guys are term 1? Cool, so lots of term 1s. Welcome. Term 2? 3? 4? No term 4s. 5. Got it. Cool. Okay, so we got a great representation, and honestly, we're gonna get each of you guys are gonna get a lot out of this. So as a quick introduction, I'm Dr. Sahil Mehta. I founded MedSchoolCoach, and I'm an interventional radiologist up in Boston. I'm also the associate program director for interventional radiology at Harvard, and I've been doing this for a long time, which is helping students kind of get into and through medical school, as well as match into where they need to match into. Let me let Eliass introduce himself. Eliass is an SGU student.
Yeah, so I don't have can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I don't have quite the resume like that, but, so I'm a 4th year medical student. I'm actually doing my rotations right now at the Cleveland Clinic in Weston. I did my rotations in Atlanta, but we got kicked out, unfortunately. So just a little bit about myself. I've been working for MedSchoolCoach for about a year. I actually used them for my Step 1 experience. I used them as a tutor, and now I'm using them for residency advising. Right now, I'm also applying interventional radiology and radiology diagnostic. So I have about 18 interviews right now. So we're going to talk about why this step is important, why your career here, and why you studying, and what you need to do to be successful here. So you want me to go ahead and talk about that?
Well, why don't I just say a few quick things, which is, first, we got a lot of free stuff to give you guys, including, how many of you guys know what Online Meta is? Cool, a couple of you guys. You guys will know it even more. We're partners with Online Meta. They have a lot of great free stuff. We're going to give away some free stuff there. We're also giving away a lot of our tutoring packages, MedSchoolCoach tutoring packages, which is, we're going to talk about this at the end, but honestly, the best utilization of your time is to get somebody to help you through this, and we'll talk about why that is at the end. So we're going to be giving away a lot of that stuff, but for you guys to be eligible for that, and more importantly, for you guys to get drink tickets, you got to be registered. So make sure you go to medschoolcoach.com/SGU. So if you guys just showed in off the street, go there right now on your phone and make sure you register. If you've already registered, all good. That means we'll have your name so we can get you guys a ticket. So take a second to do that while I also talk a little bit just about, first of all, this is my first time down the island, and it's super cool. It's like a really nice place. I like it down here a lot. I've worked with so many students from SGU over the years, both getting into SGU and deciding on SGU versus US schools, but then also coming out of SGU, right, which is the ultimate goal. Everybody here is looking to come back to the States for residency. And for a second, I just want to talk about how important the step is. Now, you guys all know how important the USMLE Step 1 is, right? But I actually don't think you know, because as important as it is, it's actually even more important than that. So let me just tell you a quick anecdote, which is, as a program director, I have access to ERAS. Do you guys know what ERAS is? Let me know here know what ERAS is. ERAS is their electronic residency application service. That's the service similar to AMCAS or AACOMAS for those of you guys who apply to US schools. It's like the centralized application service to residencies, okay? And when I log into ERAS, I have the option of sorting candidates. So I have the option of sorting all my residency candidates by USMLE score, Step 1, USMLE score, Step 2, and if they're an IMG or FMG. That's really the only options I have to sort students, okay? I don't have the option to sort by letters of recommendation. I don't have the options to sort by clinical grades. I don't have the option to sort by who's really passionate about a specialty or not, right? All I have the option to do is sort by step score. And so I gotta tell you, a lot of us are somewhat lazy. We get thousands upon thousands of applications and we cannot read them, right? You guys know this process from med school. Not every med school, actually no med school is reading all the applications they get, right? They're all screening out, and residencies do the same thing, and we screen out by step score. We really, really do. As unfortunate as it is, we screen out by step score. So the first thing I do when I log into ERAS is I sort by USMLE Step 1 score. And anybody below a certain cutoff, I'm not even reading their application. Now, that sucks, right? I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And so the step is just so important for you guys to get to the point, particularly as IMGs, to get to the point of getting an interview for residency and getting 18 interviews for residency. You got to get a certain score to really be competitive for that. I'm going to talk at the end a little bit about why an incremental gain in your step score is so important. So going from a 230 to a 240 to a 250, how that really impacts what you can do in terms of your specialty choice, in terms of where you end up for your program. Well, we'll talk about at the end. For now, I want to turn it over to Eliass for a few minutes just to talk about his experience at SGU and sort of step one. Because honestly, I took it 15 years ago at this point. It was a long time ago. So I'm a little outdated, but he's definitely more dated.
So, yeah, I love SGU. It's a love-hate relationship. It's kind of weird being back here. It's like nostalgic. I just love talking to people. So if you haven't met me before, see me on YouTube or Facebook. So by show of hands, who like knows what they want to do, whereas like an idea? So if you didn't raise your hand, I'd probably start thinking about that. Being in med school, it's, some of you might have come out of college, some of you might have been doing research or getting a master's, but it's big boy decisions time, And I say that because this is a huge decision that we've made to go into med school and especially coming here. So, it's a 4-year process, if not 5 or 6 years, and you have to really plan on what you want to do and plan how it's going to work. So I came in here thinking I was going to do internal medicine. And I'm not kind of trying to shy away from internal medicine, but I ended up hating it. Yeah.
Can everybody hear us okay?
So who can't hear us?
I think you just got to hold your mic a little closer.
How about now?
Oh, yeah.
It's coming from over there. If I just speak really loud. Anyway, so what I was saying was I came to SGU, wanted to do internal medicine, switched to radiology about 3 months before ERAS opened up. I was quite a hectic process. So going through SGU, I was one of the first people to do the new curriculum that you guys are all doing now. So it was quite hectic for me. And really the key at SGU, and they bog you down with all this crappy detail. On your lectures, there's so much useless information and how you're supposed to know what you're supposed to know for the test, right? So I guess my advice I can give you in this short presentation now is really try to, if you're in term 1, you really start to have to understand of what they're looking for in the test. So by that is doing practice questions, seeing outside resources, using first aid. That's going to give you the best idea. And talking to upper termers, right? Because they were just there talking about that. So for my STEP experience, I studied at home. A lot of my friends were doing research, or like courses, like Kaplan courses, or going to Kansas City, or using other companies. One of my friends, Nikki Shaw, who's long past, he's actually a surgery resident at UT Galveston, was a tutor for MedSchoolCoach, and he told me about the program, and I hired these guys. They tutored me. I loved it. I scored well enough to where I could get all these good interviews, and I loved it so much that I used them for residency advising as well. So you guys need to worry about residency, but it's not really on your mind right now. The STEP is really what's on your mind. So a couple other pieces of advice I want to tell you guys. Now, being here on this island, there's a lot of distractions, right? Does anybody feel like there's a lot of distractions out here? No? Okay, good.
There's nothing to do. The beach seemed pretty nice.
And by distractions, I mean more like just the small things of being on Facebook, on Netflix. You really have to understand that your time is so valuable here that you have to understand how to be efficient and study, right? So a lot of you guys in term 1, who came right out of college? Did anyone here come straight out of college? So a couple people. So really with that, it's understanding how to do time management. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But now I want to take it to Sahil to let him tell you what we can offer.
Yeah, and before I tell you that, I want to get a quick show of hands. How many of you guys feel overwhelmed by the amount of resources that are out there? Yeah, me too, right? So I'm going to date myself again. Like, Picmonic didn't exist when I was in med school. Sketchy Medical didn't exist when I was in med school. USMLE didn't exist. I actually wrote USMLE, the step 2. I was the main writer for that. So all these resources didn't even exist when I was in med school, yet I felt super overwhelmed. Pathoma didn't exist. Hussein is actually one of my professors at UChicago when I was in med school there. So many of these things didn't even exist, and I felt overwhelmed when I was going through. I was like Golion or Lippincott or this or that, and now I can only sense that that's getting more and more of a problem, right? Which is that there's so many great ways to potentially learn this material, but everybody thinks that everybody has FOMO, right? They're like, oh, I don't have that thing. I need to go get that. Oh, I need to go get that. I need to go subscribe for that. And what ends up happening is that you spend so much time thinking about your resources and very little time actually studying what you should be studying, right? So one of the first pieces of advice, and maybe we'll just give, pieces of advice back and forth for a little bit. Well, one of the first pieces of advice I have for you guys to really do well on step 1 is to nail down your resources early, right? Which means that for those of you guys who are in term 1, 2, 3, start using first aid and annotating it as you go along. Because by the time you get back for term 5 and are going to be studying for the boards, you use that same exact book that you annotated and go back and look at it as you go, right? That's memory learning, right? That's how you're going to get repetitive learning. I was telling some of these guys at dinner last night that if you look at a picture of the Krebs cycle in 8 different books, that's 8 different things that are going to be in your head for the test. And that's how you're going to confuse the hell out of yourself, right? If you have one and you look at that picture and remember it, that's what's going to come back. I like distinctly remember when I was taking step 1, there was a first aid page, and I think it was like pediatric glycogen storage disorders. How many of you guys have gotten to pediatric glycogen storage disorders yet? Okay, maybe soon. So let me tell you, they're a pain, right? There's like 15 of them, and they all say the same thing, like Tay-Sachs versus this versus that. And I just couldn't get that in my head. And what I did was I literally just sat there and looked at that first aid page, and I studied it over and over and over again. The problem was if I started going to other resources to find and say, okay, what is Tay-Sachs, and then what does it affect? That's when the issues come in, because now you have multiple things in your head. And so I remember going into step 1 and literally just like having a photographic memory of that page, and that's what helped me do well on there. If I had a whole bunch of different pages on glycogen storage disorders, I would have an issue, right? So one of the best pieces of advice I can give you early on is to hone in on your resources, which means choose one resource. Guess what? They're all pretty good. I mean, some of them might be shitty, but most of them are pretty good, right? Is there really a huge difference between, biochemistry from Lippincott versus Golian? No. Like, at the end of the day, it's biochemistry, right? The material hasn't changed and doesn't change. You just got to pick one and stick with it. So for those of you guys who have multiple books for multiple courses, I would say get rid of one of them for each course, right? That's the earliest thing you can do. Just find one for each subject that you want to use and use it and study it and think of it as your Bible, right? And just remember that, and you will do much better. Even if that like one little topic is not in that book and is in that book, it doesn't matter. That's like one tiny little topic of 10,000 on step 1. Really hone in on your resources is one of the first tips I can give you.
And to speak on that, if you're in term 1, and term 5 is a little different, but in the earlier terms, really make sure that you're marking what you don't remember or what you didn't do well on. Because when it comes time for step, you're not going to remember exactly how well you did on certain subjects. So if you were really weak in biochem in certain parts, like in genetics, you need to have that annotated and written down so that when it comes time to step study, you know exactly what you need to study, and you're not just restudying the same stuff that you already know, right? So with that.
Yeah. What other tips do you have?
So a lot of tips. For term 1s, for questions, did they give you USMLE RX yet? When did they give you USMLE RX? In term 5? Okay, so for now, you guys need to find a good question bank. So questions are probably the most pivotal part of learning. So I use like BRS. I use a lot of Kaplan questions. For biochem, you can literally just Google just biochemistry questions on genetics. You can read something over and over again, but honestly, in my opinion, the practicality of doing the question is what makes it stick. Another thing, for flashcards. So who here uses flashcards? So how much time does it take for you to make flashcards like that? It's a lot of time. So, I personally don't like flashcards. I never use them. So I just want to be wary. I just want you guys to be wary about when you make flashcards or make all these very nice, beautiful charts that you're not spending too much time making them as opposed to studying them, right? So if you're taking too much time, that's taking away time that you could be studying those resources. So it's really like Dr. Mehta said, nailing down the resources, making sure that you have the time management, making sure that you know what you're studying, and just annotating and making sure that as you go through your time here, by the time you get to step, you know exactly what you need to study, and in those 6 or 7 weeks, right? Because you only have 6 or 7 weeks to study for that test, right? Maybe 8 if you're, if you're in the spring term, but it's really 6 or 7 weeks before you start rotations. So you have to make the best time out of those 6 or 7 weeks. And like I said, when I was in term 1, if I didn't remember something, I would have it in a smart book on an Excel file, and I had it with me through the whole 2 years. I didn't remember, COP 1 versus COP 2 Golgi apparatus, but they test that stuff, right? So by the time it came to study for STEP, I wasn't wasting time studying the stuff that I already knew. That's just a complete waste of time. So, as you're going along through your career, make sure you're keeping track of what's giving you trouble, right? Because here, your grades are important, but in reality, what you're here for is studying for the step. That's really what they're here. They're teaching you how to study for the test, right? They're just teaching you that material. That's all it is. So like I said, as you get through, just make sure you're notating and annotating and making sure you know what you know and what you don't know.
How important do you guys think grades are in the residency application process? It is absolutely 100% unimportant. Your grades in your first and second year mean absolutely nothing, 0, okay? What means everything is the step score. So why do you need to get good grades? You need to get good grades because that means you know the material for the step, right? So as you guys are going through and coming home every night and studying the 4,000 things that you have to, how many of you guys are doing any QBank questions along with that on a nightly basis? Is anybody doing that? Because I would start if you're not, which is to say, have a subscription to some QBank, and it doesn't have to be the best one. It can be any one, really. And make sure every night that if you did cardiac pathophys in class today, go home and do 20 cardiac pathophys questions, right? Because the reality is the way that you study for this step is really about understanding what a question writer thinks about, right? So when I wrote the USMLE RX QBank, I was literally thinking all the time about how does a question writer think about this, right? What does a question writer do? And that's what makes a good QBank versus a bad QBank. It's, can you get that stem to be exactly like the USMLE question writers make it? Which is essentially like, if it boils down to it, it's a lot of information, clinical information, some of which you may or may not understand, right? If I told you a patient's creatinine 0.9, how many of you guys know what that means? Nobody. Yeah, maybe a few people, okay? White blood cell count's 11.2. Creatinine's, hemoglobin is 11.8. Hematocrit is 39.3. Now, as you guys are reading that, the people who don't understand how to think about USMLE step questions are sitting there and are like, oh shit. What did that mean? Hematocrit was 39. Is that good or is that bad? I don't know. Creatinine was 0.9. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Is it too high, too low? Renal failure? I don't know, right? But the question stem really came down to the bottom, which could ask something completely different and had nothing to do with hemoglobin, had nothing to do with hematocrit, nothing to do with the creatinine, and you didn't have to worry about any of those things, right? So, I mean, it's kind of unfair because as question writers, we're clinical physicians, right? Which means that I know what a normal white blood cell count is. I know what a normal sodium level is. I know what a normal potassium level is like that. Like, I don't have to think about it. But as a med student, I had to think about it, right? And I didn't know what it meant, and you really don't know what it means until you've been on the wards for 1, 2, 3 years, right? If you think about somebody who's been through the wards for a year, like creatinine makes a whole lot of sense. I say 0.9, you know what that means immediately, right? Normal, fine. I say 2.3, abnormal, like right away. There's not even a hesitation. But for you guys, rightfully so, there's a hesitation. But so much of that material is totally superfluous to a USMLE question. What it comes down to is really the question stem and what they're asking. So I guess what I'm trying to say is as you're going through and learning how to take these tests, it's important to learn what the question writer is thinking. The only way you're going to do that is to get a question bank and kind of go through those questions on almost a nightly basis, right? And I'm not saying you're not going to take a full-length test every night. Of course not. You can't do that. But even if you do 10, 20, 30, 40 questions a night, and then go back and review them, you will get in that understanding, and that's what's so important when you actually go take the test.
One more thing about that, so this is more geared towards the term 4s and term 5s, but once they do have they given you UWorld yet? They gave it to you today? So one real big piece of advice I can give you is UWorld is probably one of your best resources you can use. When you're using UWorld, I highly recommend of using UWorlds and doing blocks in a specific, like using only cardio questions. Like if you study cardio, then you go do the cardio questions. I would use RX for that. But UWorld is really the best way to gauge how you do in like a mixed block of just 40 questions of just any kind of subject. So whenever you're doing UWorld questions or most question banks, I would recommend doing them in a mixed fashion because you're really just trying to test how you can go through a 40 block section and just having, like immuno, hemo, cardio, GI, they're all going to be one after the other. It's not going to be, heavy on one thing. So that's another piece of advice I'd give.
Buzzwords are actually super important in USMLE studying. And so I'd start to actually think about them now. And that might be flashcards, it might be, anything that will help you with word recognition is actually really important. And again, the only way you're really going to know that is not by learning of the PowerPoint slides that you get in class, because those probably aren't very skewed towards the USMLE, but really doing those review type questions, right? I think that's a super important thing. Buzzwords, unfortunately, USMLE. Now the reality is in medicine, buzzwords mean nothing, right? I mean, side note, almost everything you learn in USMLE Step 1 is totally, utterly useless for clinical practice, right? If you asked me to take a USMLE Step 1 test right now, I would absolutely fail it, no questions asked. It sucks, right? Because you're going to put all this time into it, you're going to think about this, so you're going to not waste, but you're going to really spend hours and hours of your life doing this. And then it's all going to go by the wayside, but it's kind of one of these things like all physicians have to do it. It's just a rite of passage. I guess let me shift for 1 second, because I said I was going to tell you guys how important that sort of incremental bump of 5, 10, 15 points is, right? Now, how many of you guys, I'm not going to actually show his hands because it might be embarrassing, but some of you guys might be at risk for thinking, I'm going to fail this test, right? Others of you might be doing really well and really want to bump your score higher, right? Maybe you're already passing and want to get a 230. Maybe you want to get a 240, 250. What I want to stress and emphasize to you guys is actually how important each of those points, unfortunately or fortunately, is in your residency process, okay? And it's actually not just residency process, it's life, right? A physician, a doctor, is very different from another doctor, right? So a internal medicine doc who's practicing in the community versus a hospitalist versus a neurosurgeon versus an IR versus a pathologist versus a dermatologist versus an ENT, like their life is completely and utterly different from each other, right? So there's actually no field like medicine where at the end of 4 years you have to decide what you're going to do and kind of stick with that really forever. And the reality is, again, like it might be completely different than what your friend is doing. In the same, while you're both doctors, you're going to be doing very, very different things. Now, I tell you that because there are some things in medicine that you might hate. You might hate internal medicine. You might hate pediatrics. I hated OB-GYN, right? You might hate things and not want to do that, and you might love other things and want to do that, and that really makes an impact on your entire career, right? If you love OB-GYN and want to do OB-GYN, you're going to be miserable as a pathologist, right? If you love IR, you're going to be miserable as an internal medicine doc. And so it's not just scoring, it's not just passing, it's scoring well enough that you can have your specialty choice, right? And so a lot of people, now you guys are at SGU, right? SGU is the best Caribbean med school out there. There are a lot of other students at other Caribbean med schools that are just hoping to pass, right? Pass rates 50%, et cetera. You guys should really be excelling on this step, which means scoring 230, 240, 250 plus, because that's going to allow you to actually choose the specialty of your choice. What other impact does the specialty of your choice make besides just happiness in you, right? So again, if you want to be an OB-GYN and you can't be an OB-GYN because your score didn't come out as well as you wanted to, or you want to be an IR and you can't go into IR because your score didn't come out as well as you wanted to, well, you might be miserable in life. That's a big deal. Number two, the discrepancy of pay for physicians is quite huge at the end of the day, right? And so I'm just going to throw out some numbers, and these don't hold completely true across the country, but in general, a hospitalist might make $150,000 a year. Really, really nice salary, really great living. Don't get me wrong. But a OB-GYN might make $300,000 a year. An ENT might make $500,000. An ortho might make $600,000 a year. That's a huge gap, right? Between $150,000 and $600,000 times 30 years of your life. That's, at the end of the day, millions of dollars and a lot of loans that you guys could pay back a whole lot quicker if you're in the specialty that you want. Now, all the money in the world makes absolutely no difference if you're miserable, right? So don't be miserable. It makes zero difference if you're miserable. Don't go into a specialty because you want to make money. That's a bad idea. But if you want to take a competitive specialty, if you're thinking about, hey, how can I maximize my earning potential, then that extra points between a 230 and a 250 make an enormous difference in your life, right? And I think that comes down to why when you guys go and study, or even before that, 6 months before you're ready to study, why I think tutoring makes a huge difference in your outcome, right? So you might look at a price of a tutor and you say, wow, that's expensive, right? $2,000 plus for however many hours, right? That's an expensive proposition, and it is. how much is your tuition? About 40 grand a semester, right? Plus room, board, coffee here is mad expensive, I know, right? So it's not cheap to be down here. The drop in the bucket that tutoring is going to cost you is going to be so worth it for your overall success on this, right? And Eliass is a kind of living proof of that. But it's just so important. Like I can't stress the importance of those 6 weeks, or I would say really all of your term 5 as you're studying, right? Getting your ducks in order, making sure you have a study plan, letting somebody guide you through what resources are good for you. What are you weak in? What are you strong in? Why can't you understand that question? Let's dig down and really get to the bottom of what you're struggling with. That's going to go so much further than anything else you can do, like really sitting down one-on-one with somebody who's an educator, somebody who's taken the step, somebody who's really, really good at tutoring you through that process, right? And I think that goes to talk to some of the courses that are also offered, which may be helpful for some people, but for others may not be. I know Eliass has some stories on that.
Did Dr. Madden give y'all the talk with the correlation, the grade correlation? So yeah, don't let Dr. Madden scare you. I know that was like a very stressful presentation. It's really more his tone. He is 100% right. I know we said that grades don't matter, and they don't in terms of residency, but they really do matter when you're taking your test because your grades do correlate with the step. And Dr. Mehta was talking about how in term 5 is getting your duck in order, but it's really now in term 1 and term 2 getting your ducks in order, because like he said, like I know it kind of has like a college feel here and it doesn't really feel, but in reality, like, this is like what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Right? I mean, that's like a kind of a crazy thing to think about, right? Like when I started thinking about that, I started like getting very stressed because like I'm about to start residency and I'm going to be like responsible for people's lives starting in a few months. That's a pretty crazy thing to think about, right? So you want to be prepared for that. And I know people are like looking at me wide-eyed, but that's really the case. You're going to come out of your 4th year, literally writing SOAP notes and presenting to physicians to literally taking care of people's lives, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, their family members, their friends, right? That's a big deal, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm just saying that's like something you want to be prepared for, right? So, speaking off Dr. Mehta and what he said about studying for the step, right? That's if you want to go into a specialty where you want to be good at that, you have to get your ducks in order right now.
How many of you guys are going to take time out of the island to study, or most of you guys are going to study on the island for step 1, or many of you probably maybe don't even know that. How many people are going to take time at home, wherever home may be, and study there? How many people are going to stick on the island and really study through? Okay, so we obviously, I think the environment that you study for step in actually makes a big difference too. I distinctly remember coming out after my step 1 exam and being like, oh, hello world, I haven't seen you. Like, it's really, really and it's probably the only time in my life that I really crammed down like that. Like I took those 6 weeks and had a schedule and stuck to it and did the same thing every single day, right? Which means I woke up, I went to the gym, I came home, I studied, I ate, literally the same thing every single day. And honestly, it was stressful and it was really painful for me to do that because I'm not somebody who just likes to sit in one place and do that. But I had to do it, and I would say when you guys are wherever you go, whether it's home, my wife has a story, she's a physician too, and literally at 3 o'clock, every single day, her grandma would make her tea. And so it actually still is stuck with her after USMLE Step 1, that at 3 o'clock every single day, she has to have tea, because that's like how much the habitual nature of USMLE Step 1 studying got into her. So make a schedule when you guys are wherever you are and stick to it and kind of hunker down and do that same thing every single day, every single day, every single day during that 6-week or 8-week study period that you have, because that's actually really important for your overall success at the end.
And the step is a very long test. It's 7 blocks of 40 questions. So normally right now in term 1 or in term 2, it's usually like 120, 130 questions. So imagine 280 long paragraph questions. So and that it's a long day. So just another quick piece of advice I'd give is start trying to get your question stamina there now. Because I remember when I first started studying for the step, I noticed that like by block, when I was taking my practice exams, by like the 3rd block, I was like fogged up, and I was like, oh, this is bad. Like I can't think. Like I keep reading the same line over again. Like why is this happening? And it turned out I was just hungry, but But I'm just saying, like, when you guys are studying, and you have to start thinking about like how your body responds to food, how it responds to caffeine or whatever other stimulants you're using, and not that I'm condoning that. That's another piece of advice. Just make sure that your question statement is up. By the time you get to STEP, that's 7 blocks. That's 280 questions. It's a long test. And that takes every single second of that is all the brain power you can imagine. And it's tiring. You come home and you're just like, I can't even think about that test. I just want to pass out. So starting from now, especially in term 5, just start to think about like how you start feeling after you do long blocks, like when you do 2 blocks, 3 blocks. Start thinking about how you feel. Start seeing how your body responds. Start saying like, okay, if I get this much sleep, because in reality, in those 6 weeks, you really have 6 weeks to kind of fine tune how you're going to feel on test day, because you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you are not in A+ shape on test day, you're not going to do well.
Obviously, the intention is not to scare. Well, actually, no. Let me take that back. Part of the intention is certainly to scare you guys, right? Because it is really to emphasize how important, unfortunately, one test is. Like I honestly tell my students that USMLE Step 1 is the most important test you're ever going to take. Okay? It's more important than the MCAT. It's more important than the SAT. On both of those tests, you can make up for it and do other things, right? You guys probably know Step 1 you take once, unless you fail. Don't fail, right? But on that one chance you have, you got to score high because you can't take it again. Again, it's going to determine if you can get into residency. It's going to determine which residency you can get into. And so it really is the most important test that you guys are all going to take. And so I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to study towards there, to get the help you need to get there, to really boost yourself to a place where you're going to do as well as possible. I want all of you guys to walk out, or when you get that score, right, and that MBME report comes and you get that score, you really want to breathe a sigh of relief that I can do anything I want to do, right? You don't want to put yourself in the position where you get a score and say, now I'm limiting my choices, or now I have to scramble, or now I have to, take it again, God forbid. Like, you don't want to take it again, of course. But doing something where you're going to limit your choices is not what you want. So part of this is to scare you. Part of it's, to also encourage you, because there's so many people that do so well from this, right? I think you guys are actually really set up extremely well to score high on this test. Why? You don't have a ton of class time necessarily, right? Your class time is relatively limited. You have resources here. Like my med school, they made a point to say, we don't teach the step. You figure it out on your own, okay? From what I've heard, and Elias, you can correct me if I'm wrong, at least SGU is like in that mentality of thinking towards the step, giving you guys time off to study, giving you guys resources, some at least, to get there. And so utilize them and take that time. I mean, you have an opportunity to really do well on this test, as long as you plan correctly, as long as you sort of line your ducks up, not just term 5, but as early as term 1, right? Annotating first aid, figuring out what's important and what's not important. On step 1, anatomy is like this much of the exam, right? In your first year, anatomy takes up like that much time. It's like totally, it's just very skewed. How are you going to know that unless you talk to other people, unless you have somebody who's going to help you through and understand, okay, what are the things I really have to concentrate on? Now, of course, you still have to do well in your anatomy class, but it's such a tiny portion, maybe you should be spending that time studying something else, which is a huge portion of the exam.
And for term 2s and for term 5s, the BSEE is really like the most annoying test that you'll take at SU. It's so scary, and it's a long test, and they ask the questions that are like just all that BS that like you just didn't want to remember. That all comes up on the test. So I'm not trying to scare you. Like, that's honestly, when I walked out of that test, I was so mad. I was like, wow, like the one thing I said I wasn't going to study because it's not going to show up, it literally showed up. So don't do that. Also, whatever you learn the week before your BSEE, don't just blow that off, because they will put that on the test. It will show up. So for term 2s and term 5s, whatever you're learning in either pathophys or neuro or whatever it turns up, that will show up on the test. And for term 1s, think about that, or term 4s. Treat the BSEE and the CBSE for term 5s like the step. Practice how you play. Make a schedule, make a mini schedule of how you would be studying for the step in those 6 weeks of dedicated. Because in reality, the BSEE it's not really board-like questions, but it's board information, right? And if you practice now and you get all the information down, it's going to make that 6 weeks that much easier, right? Because those 6 weeks, I was literally a mess. Like it was hard to sleep. I was so stressed, and in reality, having a tutor to tell me like, okay, this is what you're doing is right, and what you're doing, this is wrong, you need to fix this, here's your schedule, that really took a huge weight off my shoulders. So like I'm saying, treat the BSEE kind of like the step, practice how you play.
Now, after this test, you guys are finally like free, right? After step 1, you guys are finally free in terms of you're getting to patient care, which is what everybody obviously here is looking forward to and wants to do, right? All this other stuff, learning about the Krebs cycle, is like not a lot of fun. Taking care of patients is what's fun, and that's what you want to get to. So I guess I'll leave with one little piece of advice, which is, I left step 1 and I said, oh, hello world, like I'm back. This is finally, I'm done with this. But all the time I put into it was totally worth it, because at the end, I got a score that I was happy with. I got a score where I could do anything I wanted to, and I finally got to move on to the things that were actually interesting, right? Getting onto the wards, taking care of patients, seeing patients, doing procedures, et cetera, right? So you want to get to that point, right? This is a stepping stone to that point. It's the hardest stepping stone to that point. It's the time you're going to put in the most effort to that point, but it's totally worth it on the other end, right? And so for all the hard work you guys already put in through college, through the MCAT, through everything else that you've done, I would say this is one of the last pieces of like truly, truly hard work you're going to have to put in before you finally get to the fun parts of medicine, right? And so if you think about it that way, hopefully you at least, as you're studying, keep that in the back of your head, right? I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this for a reason. Because honestly, you might want to jump off that cliff at some point, like while you're studying, right? You're gonna want to jump off that cliff. You're gonna say, what am I doing? Is this really worth it? At the end, it is. Sorry. At the end, it is absolutely worth it, right? You're gonna get to do what you guys all love to do, take care of patients, go into whatever specialty you want. You just gotta hunker down for that little bit of time to get there. And the little bit of time is unfortunately, 6 weeks, but probably longer than that, 2+ years that you're down here on the island, is like really like hunkering down, making sure that you're putting all your effort into studying and learning this material so that you can finally get to the good parts of medicine and forget all about this other stuff. Like I have forgotten everything about USMLE Step 1.
Rotations are so cool. Like you literally walk around and you have like a white coat and a stethoscope and you're going and seeing patients. It's honestly the coolest thing. Like, you guys aren't there yet, but I'm telling you, like, really look forward to that and, like, just get off this island, because when you get to rotations, unless you go in Jersey, which is, like, miserable because it's cold, like, every other spot is great. And it's honestly so much fun. Just keep that, I'm sorry if I offended anyone from Jersey, I'm sorry. Just keep that in mind. And, another piece of advice, it's not really step advice, but kind of, your friends here that you make on this island, I made some of my best friends like in my life on this island, and guys who will literally be in my wedding in 2 years, because you got to pack 2 years of like just stress and craziness, or like a lifetime of friendship in 2 years, right? So the friends you make here, honestly, are going to be, hopefully your friends for life. So, make sure you have that social structure. Make sure you talk to your friends. Be nice to everybody, right? Don't be hyper competitive and start trying to undercut people. No one likes that. That happens in rotations. It really does. But yeah, like I said, the friends you make here, they're going to be with you all throughout 4 years and after that. And who knows, you might match at this, in the same state, and you're going to see them, and who knows, you might even work with them, because they're all going to be physicians, right? So just keep that in mind.
So we want to obviously get your questions too, right? Because I'm sure some of you guys have questions about, anything. Can be anything about medicine, about med school, about SGU, about anything else, and we want to answer them. I want to just quickly tell you about Med School Coach, because obviously we're here. We came down here because really felt like we wanted to make a presence and kind of talk to students in person. I talked to so many students yesterday and today, and it's actually been great really getting to know and understand SGU a little bit more, right? You guys are in the biggest med school in the country, or outside the country. Definitely the biggest med school in this country. Good job. But you're at one of the biggest med schools in the world, right? And it's all really going to be about how you get off and how you get back to residency. And that's what we're here to help you with at Med School Coach. So I started Med School Coach about 13 years ago now. It's been a long time. And in that time, we've started basically helping students get into med school, right? And then we had so many students get into med school that they basically said, hey, can you help us through USMLE? And we said, okay, yeah, maybe we can start doing that. But we kind of did it in a slow fashion. We really made a curriculum up. We really got the best tutors anywhere by far. We made sure that they were, number one, really, really great at understanding the material, but more importantly, number two, really, really awesome at understanding what every student needs. And that's what's important, right? You guys all know you probably have a really smart person in the class. They can't teach you for shit, right? They're like really bad. You can't understand what they're saying. You don't know why they got to the rationale that they got to. You really need somebody who's an educator who knows how to kind of teach you. And so we put all our tutors through this rigorous training process to get them to the point to, number one, hire them, and number two, we train them even more to get them to be really, really great teachers of the material so that they can help you through. They'll help you kind of identify the right resources to use. Now, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? There's a lot of great resources out there. I already told you, and you guys already have access to a lot of great resources. One of them is Online Meta, by the way, which you guys are all going to get free subscriptions to, which is great. Like, utilize it. It's a great resource. We're not here to reinvent and reteach you everything. What we're here to do is hone in on the things that you don't understand, hone in on how to answer a question, hone in really on how to take that 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 point increase. We had a student who increased their score by 55 points. I mean, it's like an incredible increase just by understanding what they didn't know, right? By really focusing in on the things that they needed to focus in on, learning how to dissect each question. And then eventually, after you get a great step score, we go back to sort of helping you through getting into the right residency and matching into the right residency, right? So we have several program directors and ex-program directors on our staff who can actually help you. I don't know how good the advising or poor the advising is here in terms of helping you with that kind of stuff, but help you choose, okay, what specialty should I apply into? Should I apply into a backup specialty? What does my personal statement have to say? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? How much research do I need? Do I need to take an extra year off? All these kind of things to help you really make sure that you're going to match at the best program for you, right? And that's different for everybody. The best program for you is different than the best program for the person next to you. But these are the things that we kind of help with at MedSchoolCoach. Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll answer it in my way, and then I'll actually let Elias answer it in his way, which is to say that I think that there's a lot of benefit for both ways, right? So there are some people who are early on, and I'm not saying you need an hour of tutoring every night, like that's crazy if you're in term one, right? You don't need that. But what you do perhaps need is some structure around what you're doing, how to answer those questions. Are you progressing okay? And so maybe that means early on, if you're in term 3, making sure that at least on a weekly schedule or maybe a bi-weekly schedule, somebody's coaching you through and being able to, hone in on what's weak, what's wrong, what's strong, what's not, and help you. Because the worst thing to do is come to us, and we definitely have students who do this, 2 weeks before the test and say, I'm scoring a 210, I need a 250. Yeah, not gonna happen, right? Like, not gonna happen in 2 weeks, right? So if you have time and can understand very early on, okay, where am I progressing, where am I weak in, that's huge and really, really, really beneficial to you. Now, when you get towards your dedicated study time, now let's ramp it up, right? Now let's do an hour a day to make sure that you're moving along in the right pace.
So BSEE 1, when I first got there, remember it was a new curriculum. So this really applies to term 2s and term 1s. So when I first got to the island, remember it was a brand new curriculum, right? So the curriculum you guys run, I was literally the first class to do that. So we didn't really know how it was gonna work. So I kind of started studying, like actually studying, probably about at the beginning of term 2, I'd meet with like a group and we would use like first aid and we go through, all the systems. Like we go through cardio, and we go through GI, or we go through POEM, or whatever the things you learned in term 1. We did a lot of the biochem and a lot of the genetics. I made sure to go back and redo all the practice questions, but really at the beginning of term 2. But not like crazy, remember, because you still have to learn the stuff in term 2, because it's gonna be on the test as well. So you wanna do some light review, make sure you have brushed up, but don't, like I said, don't knock off what you're learning in term 2, because even the week of the BSEE, whatever you learn will be on the test. So we have you fill out a questionnaire, and it's a pretty hefty questionnaire that kind of sees, what you're weak in, what you're strong in, how you like to study, and the team kind of matches you with the tutor. And in terms of the way tutors work, everyone's different, but they all go through a process of being, coming through MedSchoolCoach where, Dr. Mehta was like saying, we all have the people who took the test, did well, know how to teach it. So it's really between you and the tutor of how it's gonna work for you. And that's why it's so great. It's very personalized to you and your schedule. So if you're someone who, can't really wake up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., right, we might work around that. Or if you're someone who likes to work out in the evening, right, we'll work around that with that schedule. And we use, because I'm a tutor, so I use just Excel, and I kind of just lay it out all on one page, so it's just right there, nice and easy to read. But like some other tutors might have it different. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just answer that question quickly as well, which is that we actually take a lot of time and have people, what we call our student success team, who are masters in they have masters in education, right? So we have our tutors who are either physicians or fourth years who've just taken the test and done really well. And then we have a whole team that's dedicated to making sure that we're matching people with the right people, making sure that they're progressing along the right thing. And that's one of the things that I think we do so much better than everybody else, which is that and you guys will find this, right? If you guys are looking for a tutor, you'll Google tutors, 10 will come up, and it'll be some med student somewhere who says, I'm tutoring, right? Okay, cool. What if that med student's on a rotation? What if you have a problem with it? What if there's an issue? Like, that's what you're gonna, I can't tell you how many students we get who migrate back over and they say, oh yeah, I use those guys and then it didn't work out, you know? So one of the things that we really try to do is make sure that we're matching you with the right person for you, right? That might be education style, that might be learning style, it might be timing. All these different things are things that we take into consideration when we're matching. And we also may match you with 2 tutors, right? So there's a lot of people who need 2 tutors to help them. One person helps them on content, one person helps them on question review. So it's flexible yet powerful in that way. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been doing this for a long time, and I think there's a couple of things that differentiate us comparatively to others, right? The first is that I run the company. I own the company. I've done this for a long time, and I'm a doctor at heart, right? Like, this is what I do. I actually like working with students. I like working with patients. We're not here to take money and run, and I honestly know that there are other companies that do that just that are businesses, right? And yes, we're a business, right? We're down here. We definitely we support a lot of lives doing this, but we do it for the right reasons, and we really care about the way the students end up. And I think a lot of that goes back to who we hire. So when I started this, I literally would not hire anybody who said that they were doing this for the money. They were out, like, right away. I wanted people who really actually cared about educating students who enjoy teaching. And so as we go through our screening process of tutors, I would say that for every about 30 applicants we get, we interview about 5 of them and we hire 1 of them. And what ends up happening is that we see 10 of them on other people's websites a couple of weeks later. And so we're just very, very selective about what we do, and that's how we get good results at the end of the day, which is what it's about, right? I mean, listen, at the end, like, I want you guys to all have great results. I want everybody here to do well on their boards. I want everybody to get the specialty that they want, because that's what I take satisfaction in. Like, when I get emails that say, I got accepted to med school, or I got a 255, like, this was amazing, like, that's why I take satisfaction. Even Elias, like, I'm helping him through, like, just talking to some IR program directors and stuff like that just to help him. I mean, I want people to, like, be excited at the end and get the specialty they want. So maybe that answers your question, right? I think at the end of the day, there's a lot that comes down to simply actually caring about, like, what happens with a student. And I think we do that far better than anybody else. And I think if you talk to students who've used us, if you look online, like, you'll get that sense. We have great tutors, we have education professionals, like, have everything sort of covered. It's not never gonna be left out on an island with us like you will with others. No. So you have this weird dynamic up here, because I'm an interventional radiologist. Elias wants to be an interventional radiologist, so that's actually very skewed. There's not a lot of interventional radiologists out there. I think it goes back a little bit to, like, how do you choose a specialty and how do you understand what you like and you don't like, right? So I'll just tell you my story, which is when I was a first year in med school, somebody told me about a TIPS procedure. Have you guys heard about a TIPS? Who knows what a TIPS is? You do?
TIPS is a procedure for a person who normally has, like, cirrhosis or something, and you're trying to fix their esophageal varices so it'll bleed out and die.
Excellent. That's a great summary. So TIPS is it's a procedure where you basically, for patients with portal hypertension, you guys probably all know what portal hypertension is, right? Your liver gets hard, so your liver is cirrhotic. So when your liver is cirrhotic, you develop portal hypertension, right? Portal hypertension means your portal system, remember there's 3 essential systems in the body for blood, right? Arterial venous and portal venous. Portal venous taking all the blood from your bowel back to your liver, filtering it out to your liver and going back to your heart, right? If your liver is too hard, it's simple plumbing. What happens is that your body opens up pathways that used to be open when you were a baby, like a coronary vein or a short gastric vein, and those can bleed, okay? So if I had a marker, I'd draw it out and like get all into it, but if you're curious, I'll draw it out later. Anyway, so patients suffer from portal hypertension, right? And they get bleeding esophageal or gastric varices, which essentially can kill them, right? They're bleeding quickly, they're dying on the table. And I remember hearing about this TIPS procedure where essentially you go through the neck, you go down to the hepatic vein, and you stick a really long needle into the portal vein. And at the end, you leave a stent in there and create a new pathway for blood to flow through. So pathway doesn't flow up the esophageal varices, but flows back towards the liver and into the heart. And then you put a Band-Aid on the neck, and you walk away like a ninja. And I was like, I literally was like, holy shit, wait. You created a whole new pathway for blood to flow through the liver, through the neck, and you put a Band-Aid on at the end and you walked away? Like, that was amazing to me. And that's when I learned about IR, and I ended up going into IR, and now I do TIPS every week. And it's one of the, like, it's these little things during med school that you might like catch on to, and you say, wow, I'm really interested in that, right? And maybe it is like the differential for COPD exacerbation, how to treat it. Maybe it's how to treat a sickle cell anemia patient and the pain that they're suffering, right? I mean, there's so many different things that might capture your interest, but think about these little things that capture your interest as you go through and make a mental note of it. Oh, you know what? I really like dealing with TIPS patients or portal hypertension patients, and I thought that was really cool, so let me keep IR on the back of my mind, right? I really think that glaucoma surgery is cool, right? Let me keep ophtho in the back of my mind, right? I really love dealing with babies and the interactions that I have with them, and they're so damn cute, yada, yada, yada. Peds, right? All those things should be, that's how you kind of go through. And you're never gonna, I mean, I was telling some of these guys last night, it's like really hard to pick a medical specialty. It is. It's extremely hard. Keep an open mind, keep an eye on everything. Explore everything you can. So while you're on your medicine rotation at Maimonides, if your patient goes down for a GI scope, go see them. If they go down for a coronary cath, go check it out. If they go down for an IR procedure, go see it with them, because that's your opportunity. As a med student, you can walk in anywhere. It's actually pretty awesome. As a med student, you can walk anywhere and be like, I'm a med student. Everybody's gonna be like, oh yeah, come on, right? You're never gonna have that opportunity again. It's really only as a med student that you have that opportunity to show up, know nothing. Nobody cares if you know nothing. Nobody expects you to know anything. But they all are kind of excited to have you. They're like, yeah, come on, let me tell you a little bit about what I do. I promise that everybody would be like that. So take that time. Like, don't get in that rut when you're on your medicine or your surgery rotation and think, all I can do is medicine or all I can do is surgery. Explore other things. You might be on a medicine rotation. You might call a consult for dermatology, right? Patient has some weird rash. Be in there when the dermatologist comes in and looks at the patient and does their differential or does their punch biopsy. Like, you want to see all these things. And that's how you explore, particularly when you don't have a lot of time to do it, which I know you guys don't have a lot of time to explore, particularly specialties that are a little different, right? You're not going to have a lot of time. You're off the island. Now you're into your rotations. Now you have to apply to residency. So take that time during your rotations to do all that.
You can do 3 4-week rotations outside of the SGU network. So if you, and Dr. Madden will probably talk to you in term 5, but there's like a list of affiliated hospitals that they have that you can go do any elective at, right? So they have them in Chicago and California and Florida and Ohio, a lot in New York, a lot in New Jersey. Now, to do rotations outside of SGU's network, you were saying you have to actually go and contact the coordinators of their medical school and fill out an application. And some of them have fees, some of them have background checks, some of them have all this paperwork, but it's really, and that's a good point, because if you guys are thinking about where you want to practice or where you want to do residency, if you really want to do a residency in the state of New York, you should think about doing elective rotations in the state of New York, right? So, but you have to go and actually contact the coordinators themselves. You can't do it through SGU. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
just so you know, at a program director level, it's really important to have done rotations, obviously in the subject matter or the field that you want to go into. And it's important to show interest in regions as well. Residency admissions is somewhat regional. So if you did 3 away rotations in New York, like that tells us that you want to be in New York, and if I was in New York, I might interview you more than if you're in California. So just keep that in mind for your non-SGU rotations where you can go away. You want to try to go maybe somewhat regional, or you want to go to a program where you can really make a great impact, right? So if you're doing, Elias did a sub-I at Emory, right? So you can go to places where maybe you really want to match into, because there is no better understanding of a student than actually seeing them, right? So if I have somebody who's rotated with me, I can make the decision if I'm going to take them or not, actually irrespective of step score. So it's like the one time that maybe your step score doesn't matter as much, because if I really like you and you did a kick-ass job on the rotation, then I will vouch for you and maybe we'll take you in. Even if your step score isn't as high as somebody else's. So that's the one way to kind of make up, but you can remember you can only do that for a couple of places, right? How many places can you really rotate at? Maybe 1, 2, 3 at most. So utilize them, what we call away rotations, in a really smart way.
And just one more point. And one more point just to speak on that. There are IMG non-friendly states, right? So traditionally California a little bit, Texas a little bit, but the very IMG friendly states are like New York, New Jersey, Florida. So when you're thinking about that, think about where you want to do rotations. I know you really want to go to Stanford, right? But that might be a stretch because just California has just been known to be not very IMG friendly. So when you're planning your rotations, just kind of think about that and keep that in mind.
I guess the question is, can you do your SubEyes, or I guess you call them AIs, we call them SubEyes. Can you do your SubEyes in different locations to sort of unlock the region, right? Absolutely. Yep. And it's totally fine to do that, right? So let's take ENT. If you want to be an ENT, you might do a rotation in New York to open up some doors in New York. You might do a second rotation in New York if you really want to stay in New York to get another program. But then there's a program in Jacksonville, Florida, that takes some IMGs, and maybe you really want to make a good impression there and open up some of your opportunities in Florida. Absolutely, do the third program down there. So it's totally fine to sort of switch it up and show your interest in multiple locations. In fact, that's another thing, like when you're planning out these locations and figuring it out, it's important to kind of think, okay, where do I want to match? Where do I want to open up doors? And doing it in multiple locations is totally fine.